What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of QB Class. I'm here with Derek, and today we're going to review Heisman winner Jayden Daniels. Let's jump right into this success rate map, Derek. Talk to me a little bit about what's going on here with his zone success rate, his man success rate, total adjusted accuracy, and honestly, just the overwhelming amount of green that we see on the screen.
It's a lot of green. I think it's the most green we've had of any prospect so far. It will probably continue to be that way with, considering who we have left to go with guys like Nixon, Penix, and Rattler and whoever. But yeah, it's fantastic. One funny thing I do want to point out is obviously the entire right side is green up and down the field. Malik Neighbors tends to line up on that side of the field, so that's going to help.
Certainly helps.
Yeah, and also right-handed quarterbacks just tend to throw better to their right. Drake May notwithstanding for whatever reason. But yeah, it's just a ton of green. And I think, we talked about it in the audio podcast, but like he throws every level of the field just pretty well. I think he has really, really good touch. And I think some of the timing that he plays with, the consistency of his footwork and throwing motion, when he's clean, it's just so easy for him to put the ball where he wants to. And then when you have guys who are just open consistently, like a Malik Neighbors, like a Brian Thomas Jr., their tight end Mason Taylor, I think can play. Like it's like a perfect storm for him to just be really, really accurate. And I think he has been, and he delivered about as well as you could hope. I mean, this was kind of the case, to a different degree with CJ Stroud last year, where it's like, okay, he's getting help with some of the receiver talent, but also like he's really accurate. And I think Daniels is not anecdotally, I think, as sick as CJ Stroud was, but he does have that quality to him where he just can throw every level of the field pretty comfortably. The only area of concern you kind of see here on this heat map is the middle of the field. His 11 to 20 over the middle is actually fine. 70% is actually pretty good relative to the class. It's just kind of a volume versus efficiency thing where he doesn't actually throw that area that much. So it's like there's a selection bias almost when he does throw that. It's like he knows that it's open. And so he can get there. And so credit to him for actually making those throws when he does throw them. I would just like to see him actually throw them more on film. And then the 1 to 10 yard area over the middle is actually kind of funny too, because the only route where he's in the red is slants. So I honestly couldn't tell you what it is. I don't know why he struggles throwing this area of the field as much as he does, because I think generally his timing is good. His accuracy to obviously every other level is fantastic. His tight window accuracy was generally good. So I don't think it's a problem of not being able to pin slants on guys. I think it's just like a weird, sometimes there's just like an anomalous things that happen in this charting. And you can see it's not like an overall quick game issue. You look at his 1 to 10 outside the numbers, really, really good. So maybe it's just the fact that, guys are moving across his face. That's a little bit tougher for him. Whereas, opposed to when you're throwing outside the numbers, it's a lot of curl routes, a lot of hitch routes in this offense. So maybe that's all it is, but maybe not his strongest part of his game, but he'll probably be okay in that sense, I think.
You brought up when we were talking about his charting, kind of the similarities between his style of play and like almost like a Jalen Hurts in the Eagles, where it's partially not that he can't throw across the field, it's partially that he just doesn't throw across the field. That's a big part. You talked about curls. He had a ridiculously high curl percentage of his throws. He threw almost 25% of his total charted throws were curls. That's an insanely high number, and you kind of see it reflected on the chart. You've got 85% success rate on the right side of the field, 88.9 on the left, in that little curl range, and even 66.7 on the right. That's a lot of curls. His second highest percentage of route was the 9 route, which you see in the 70.6 and the 63.2%. He's throwing a lot of 9s. He's very good at it. You got Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. are very good at running 9 routes. So it was kind of a beautiful marriage there in LSU's offense. And it led to a really good success rate of a quarterback. What are some of your kind of concerns moving to the NFL with Jayden Daniels, even though he was anecdotally the most accurate quarterback that we've charted so far, 77.3. That's the best numbers. What are the concerns moving into the NFL?
I think one is, we already touched on it. His reluctance, I think, to throw the middle of the field for me is always going to be a little bit sticky. I think that's tough. It's why I don't like Jalen Hurts, I think, as much as other people, is because he just won't throw those routes. And it's funny, you can pull up clips where he throws it and it looks good, but like you said earlier, he just like doesn't do it as much as you would like. So I think that frustrates me a little bit. I think his pocket management is almost non-existent. Like he's very much a guy where if he feels like he's hot, where he feels like things are warming up in the pocket, he's just gone. And he's definitely a good enough athlete to get away with that, especially at the college level. I think at the NFL level, that's going to be a little bit trickier to get away with, especially because he's not a guy where once he's outside the pocket, he's looking to throw like a Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. Like when these guys leave, they want to keep their eyes down the field. Jayden is very much like when he's out, he's out. Like he's just, it's time to run. Maybe that's how they were coaching him, and maybe he can be different in the NFL, but I think that's at least going to be a learning curve when he gets there for sure. So I think those are the two biggest issues that I have with Jayden Daniels right now. Speaking of curl routes, Jayden Daniels throws a lot of them. So I feel like it would be almost neglectful to not at least add one of these clips in here at this point. So this is a pretty basic play. What you're going to get here is before the snap. Obviously, you can see this slot defender kind of runs with the tight end in motion here. A little bit of an indication that you're going to get man coverage. You can also tell that just a little bit by some of the way that these guys are playing up on the line of scrimmage. Jayden Daniels is, as he should, just going to trust that Malik Neighbors can win his core route at the bottom of the screen one-on-one. And he's just you're going to see really good footwork, really good timing, really good ball placement that I think you pretty consistently see on Jayden Daniels' film. I mean, that to me is just like, it's a very simple, boring, like, oh, he's just throwing a curl route. But like NFL quarterbacks need to be able to have like the consistency and the timing and the accuracy on these kinds of plays. I mean, this ball comes out exactly what it needs to, hits his man right on the numbers, trust that he's going to win, which I think is a really important trait as well. Like this to me is just good, solid, consistent quarterbacking.
I love that you brought up the word like trust, because I feel like that's a huge thing in this LSU offense and what made him so successful. He was loaded at offensive talent positions. Nothing you could do about that. It's hard to knock a quarterback for that, but he didn't ever hesitate to throw to them. He trusted Malik Neighbors is going to get open. He trusted Brian Thomas Jr. is going to get open, and he executed those, which you see reflected in his success rate map. It was one of the things that made me love him so much in college and almost put him at my QB2 position, still kind of going back and forth there. I feel like he does need that kind of supporting cast to be the best quarterback he can, which feels like a cop-out. You know, every quarterback wants a really good supporting cast, but I do think there are quarterbacks that can improve the supporting cast around them with their style of play. I think Caleb has a better chance of doing that. I think Drake May has a better chance of doing that. But I do really think that he can be a successful quarterback if he's surrounded by a cast that can help do this skill set. You see that in Tua Tagovailoa, where he may not be the most physically talented quarterback we've ever seen, but he does seem to be able to execute with the cast that's there. All right, our next clip up here is LSU, Texas A&M. What are we looking at here?
Well, kind of like, I said, we have to touch on curl routes with Jayden Daniels. I think we also have to touch about his deep ball. And I think, I didn't want to pull up a clip where there are definitely plenty in this offense where somebody is just running free and he hits them. And like, that's cool. But every NFL quarterback should be able to do that. This clip, I think, is more interesting because I think it's a deep ball where you really see him actually have to pin it on a very difficult spot. What you're going to get here is just down the right sideline, right up until almost the right corner of the end zone. It's going to be extremely tight one-on-one coverage, and Jayden Daniels just kind of has to go pin the ball and put it in a spot where his guy can go run to it, but also a place where his guy can go up and get it. I think it's a very fine needle to thread, and Jayden does it here. There's not a whole lot to read necessarily with this play. It's kind of just he trusts the matchup. Again, we go back to that. He trusts the matchup and he trusts his guy to go win. But it's just 1-2, does a little pump fake for honestly no reason. But then the way he puts this ball, I want to pause it when he high points this ball. Given where the coverage is, given how the defender is playing this, like really pinning the receiver to the sideline, you really only have two options, which are going to be you draw it a little bit to the back shoulder and you pray the DB keeps running and the receiver can come back to it, receiver sees it, or you do it like this where you put it up for the receiver to go get and he goes and gets it. Obviously, Jayden Daniels does that here. I think it's really hard to actually put that ball where you want it when you're throwing it that far, especially across the field like this. So this to me is just really, really high level deep accuracy that you see from him pretty consistently.
When you're tracking, would this count as a covered window for your success rates?
Absolutely. Definitely.
Okay, that is one of the things that stood out for me on his profile is he had a 50% success rate on like wide receivers in a covered window, which sounds not great, but that's actually a really high number for our charting marks. 50% accuracy when a wide receiver is covered is a really good number. That usually means you're putting the ball in the right place at the right time on the right shoulder of the wide receiver, which is reflected really well here.
Definitely. And another thing I do want to add on that really quickly, a lot of his contested window throws are just 9 balls. But he's really, really good at them. So it's like, I mean, throw what you're good at, man. Like, do what you got to do. So credit to him.
I do hope that when we get to see Jayden Daniels in the NFL, that he does go to a team that has a receiver at least at the level of caliber that we get with Malik Neighbors, because I feel like it would just be such a beautiful marriage of chemistry for him to move into a role from LSU and be able to have that kind of success. So please don't take him, New England.
All right. Sadly, it's time to move into some of the concerns that I have with Jayden Daniels. I think what's funny sometimes about, or a thing that you have to consider about the charting is that I only can chart throws that a quarterback throws. And I think part of the issue with Daniels is that a lot of his worst plays are throws that he doesn't throw, are just plays that he doesn't make and he leaves on the field and don't end up in the charting sample. I think you're going to see an example of that here. You're going to get man coverage across the board. The number 2 receiver here is just going to kind of run across the field. Jayden Daniels should be able to work across the field, get to him. It's one-on-one coverage. He should be able to throw this, but the pocket's going to get a little bit muddy. He's going to feel a little bit uncomfortable and he's not going to throw it. And I think you see a lot of instances like that all throughout his film. You can see it here. Pocket here is fine. He should know there's nothing happening in the middle of the field. It's 2-man. So like there's not going to be anybody over the middle. They're really just trying to make sure neither of these outside receivers run like digs or anything like that. But this receiver running like a, medium crosser, whatever you want to call it, is going to be open. It's obviously going to be a tight window throw, but like this is an NFL throw that you need to make. Daniels, for whatever reason, I guess he just thinks that this is too tight of a window. He turns it down. He drops his eyes immediately and just starts trying to run against pressure. That to me is the type of play that really irritates me. When I watched it in Daniels, like I want a quarterback who's willing to stand in the pocket, willing to make tight window throws. And obviously, like I said, his tight window throw success rate is good, but I think there are instances where he's throwing over the middle of like this, or not throwing over the middle, I should say, where it's like, man, if you're going to be a top 8 NFL quarterback, this is a throw you need to be willing to make. It's not going to work every time. It's a hard throw, but you need to be willing to make it. And it's the difference between when I watch Caleb and Drake May. Those two guys will throw the hell out of this ball. Like they're not scared to throw this ball and give their guys a shot. Whereas I think Daniels turns down plays like this a little bit too often. Truthfully, the little thing I'll add here, receivers are going to get mad, man. Like if you don't throw this, like obviously LSU was largely successful because they were just a super talented offense overall, but you're probably not ever going to get that level of talent in the NFL and like that level of success with some of these flaws. Guys are going to get mad if you don't throw them the ball when they're open in man-on-man coverage. So I think that's a little bit something to consider as well.
Speaking of similar situations here where he makes the same decision and it works out for him, you got this guy right here.
Yeah, this is like almost trying to like judge my personal preferences versus like what actually happens on the field. What you're going to get here is, again, Jayden Daniels is going to turn down a throw over the middle of the field. This one is almost more concerning to me because he starts with his eyes to the left side, works to the backside dig that's cutting from right to left. It's wide open and he just refuses to throw it. I'll run the clip so you guys can see what I mean. He opens here, 1-2, bounces, doesn't really want to throw this. Obviously, I think this guy's running a corner out, so this is kind of pretty obviously taken away by leverage. He, in a timely manner, gets back and goes to this crosser here. At the time that he got to that crosser, I understand why he doesn't want to throw this. He might think that this safety is going to come down and pin on it, whatever. But he gets to this dig route and he like almost just doesn't actually treat it as if it's ever going to be open. Which is frustrating. Like you kind of see his eyes just flicker to it and then immediately like he just never really gets to it. And then he takes off anyway for about 40 yards. So it's like, On one hand, it irritates me so badly that he won't make this throw in structure, a throw that I think NFL quarterbacks need to make and need to be able to process and get to and throw. I mean, you can see Neighbors throwing up his hands like, what the hell, dude? And then he just runs for 40 yards anyway. I think what concerns me is I just think the process issue where he's not getting to the right throw will be more of a pronounced issue in the NFL, whereas his ability to just rip off 40 yards runs like this will probably be less prominent in the NFL, which is like an annoying and like bummer thing to say, but it's probably just the reality for most guys.
I think you see this similar situation a lot with running backs when you're doing their evaluation, where you'll see a play in college football where this running back rips off a 25-yard gain by bouncing outside the hole 3 times. But you're watching that tape and you're like, there was a huge, just an inside cut. You should have took that. And in the NFL, if you don't take that cut, that outside bouncing 25-yard run is probably not going to be there as often. And that's a similar evaluation when you're looking at quarterbacks where you're like, yes, you got a 40-yard play. It shows your athleticism. It works very well in college. You won the Heisman. But I do think it leads to a concern in the evaluation of a quarterback. Like, why did you not take the first open read?
Definitely. And I do think his athleticism, like to his credit and to his benefit for the first year or so, okay, when he messes up, he does have a plan B. That's awesome. It's just, I think when you're trying to see like what is really the highest peak of this player as a passer, you really want to see him make this throw, especially for a guy who's played 5 years. And Jayden just too often doesn't make this play.
Based on what I've seen of Jayden Daniels, I think I like him a little bit more than you. I do really love his athleticism. I love his accuracy. I am a sucker for a quarterback that can put a lot of touch on his passes and get to those sideline throws. And I think he does that really well. But I do think he does have some holes in his game. When we're talking about NFL translation, I really, really, really want to see him go to an offense that has talent. I would love, whether I think he's the QB 2, 3, 4, I would really love to see him go to the Commanders at 2. I don't know how likely that is to happen with Drake May and what they're looking for in a quarterback. But I think for me to see his best NFL success, I want him to have a wide receiver like Terry McLaurin that he can trust the same way he did with Neighbors. You have Dotson out there on the outside. You still have now Austin Eckler signed to a 2-year contract there. That's a really good escape valve. You can run the spread offense that he's so used to doing in LSU. If I'm seeing a path for upside for Daniels, it's going to be in an offense that he can use his playmakers to be a successful quarterback, not to be a successful quarterback by making himself the playmaker. What are you looking for? Where's your dream landing spot? Where do you kind of see his success most flourishing?
A dream landing spot would probably be just New York, the Giants, just in terms of like Brian Dable has had success with these types of quarterbacks, with guys who I think want to run a little bit more, want to be an empty, want to throw a little bit outside the numbers. I think he's had success with that type of player. I think more realistically, it's obviously going to be Washington or New England. I think if I had to pick between the two, probably Washington. Because my thing with Jayden Daniels is I think he actually really needs an offensive line. But the reality is that like none of the teams picking where he's going to go have an offensive line anyway. So let's at least get him with the team that has talent. And, Terry McLaurin is a legit outside receiver. Jahan Dotson, I think, has proven that he can be better than his raw production suggests. I think he can be a pretty good player. So they at least have the talent there to support his skill set a little bit. He is still a good prospect. I think people get mad at the way I talk about him, but I think he's still a quality prospect for sure. And I think he's going to have some success pretty early on because of his legs and deep ball ability. So